Hi guys, I'm here to talk about Ready for War, which is a black romance that I read in January. This video came about because I made a January wrap up. When I was editing it, it just weren't good. Keeping it back, it just weren't good. So I was like, all right, let me try again. And part of it not being good was that I completely forgot the plot line of some of the romances that I read. So when I was investigating, I went to have a look at my notes that I made when reading Ready for War, and they were cracking me up. And I thought, no, let's just do a dedicated standalone video where we go through all of the notes that I made as I was reading, and we can just have a little laugh, a little kiki, but also a bit of a discussion into, some of the themes that are in the book. I'm going to give you a short synopsis and a summary of what I think before we get into the nitty-gritty of it all. So Ready for War follows War as the male protagonist and Blossom Peace, aka P or Peace or whatever. She has many nicknames, which is one of the things that I loved. And it follows their romance. So War, he is part of this crime family. I believe they sell drugs, but I'm not exactly sure. I can't really remember. I know I said I tried to do my research, but anyway, it wasn't in the synopsis. But anyway, that's how his family have gotten some of their wealth. But they've built on that, and they each have like their own investments, and they're all entrepreneurs outside of that. So for example, War, he's a mechanic. He owns a garage, a garage, or, whatever you call it. And that's what he does as his main day job. On the other hand, Blossom Peace, she's a single mum, right? And she's recently moved to this area. This is where her dad lives. So the granddad, her son's granddad, lives. And she's recently moved there because she split up with her ex-partner, who was very toxic, it was abuse, right? And so she's moved away, she's moved closer to family, and she's very, very independent because of her whole situation and stuff. It's like she's built up all of these walls, so she doesn't really want to rely on anyone, including her own dad. And when we meet her, she's working really, really hard in order to gain money and to, financially secure a living for herself and her son. But her son is a bit troubled at the time that we meet him. Like, he's going through some stuff in terms of he's a child. He's a child. So when I say troubled, he wasn't really doing that much, but just getting into trouble is what I should say, right? And one day, him and his new friends that he's made, they decide to break in to the local mechanics. Obviously, this ends up being War's mechanic. And because he's also a criminal, he's like, I'm so sorry, guys, but like, there's gonna have to be consequences. There are gonna have to be consequences. We can't let this run. It can't be seen that like anyone can just come in our turf and do whatever they want. Like, you've broken into a criminal establishment. And so these boys are in serious, serious trouble. But for some reason or another, War ends up knowing Peace's dad. And so he calls up Peace's dad, and Peace's dad then calls us up. And then Peace's dad ends up calling Peace. And then they have to try and come up with an agreement, a situation out of what has happened in a way that will satisfy everyone, right? So what are the consequences of their actions gonna be? And then from there, that's how War and Peace meet. And obviously then there's tension, they start clashing because of that, because the first time I meet you, you've threatened my son. You threatened my son. So from then there's tension, but for whatever reason, however they manage to come up with a solution, they now are involved in each other's world, or more specifically, she's involved in his world. Then their romance blossoms from there. So it's kind of like a rivals to lovers romance. Overall, what did I think? I thought that was really entertaining. I think that's the main thing, it's really entertaining. I would go into it kind of assuming it's kind of like a romantic suspense. Not that that's what it's necessarily labelled as, but there was just a lot of action and drama going on in it. And a lot of that action and drama comes from War and his like criminality element, but also it comes from Peace's history and her ex-partner. And so I would say very, very much trigger warnings for violence against children, SA against children, domestic abuse in general, violence, all of those things. If that's not what you're into, then this isn't going to be the book for you. I do feel like it was done well. Like, I didn't feel like any of those topics, but I do want to mention that it is something that is very, very prominent in this book, which is why I say it's kind of like a romantic suspense. But the drama is really, really fun. I remember like on stage I was like, I'm eating it up with a spoon. You know what I mean? I will say it's not the most memorable in the fact that like I completely forgot about it in the space of a month until I had to go and research it up again. And I did have some serious problems with it, which is what we're going to get into. Now, I recognise is Black History Month in America. So it's like, we're gonna get into the issues of a black romance in February of all months. And we are, but not in a shady way. Just like, I would still encourage you to read it because I know I'm in the minority. I looked at the Goodreads reviews and it's like everyone's a 3-star plus, and I also gave it a 3-star. So like, this is just a solid book, a solid to good book. So if it sounds interesting to you, if you like that sort of like, I guess, urban romances, then you might enjoy this one. Now grab your tea because we're gonna get into the real nitty-gritty of it all. I think the best thing is to just go through my annotations and see what strikes me first. So the first thing first is that this is not a working class romance, but that's fine. That's just something that I kind of have been looking for recently. Like, I just want to see regular people fall in love. Like, we don't all have to own a mechanics, babe. So she is, but he's not, and that's why it's like, it's not fitting into that, but it shouldn't necessarily have to be. I just thought I would let you know in case that's something that you're looking for. So my first main comment is about the misogyny in this book, and it was an ongoing factor. And this is something that I wanted to kind of like discuss with you. I guess it kind of makes sense for who Ward is as a person and like everything around him, for him to have like these misogynistic takes. But how do we feel about it? Do we still want it to be seen? I think a lot of people will be like, oh yeah, well, it's realistic. And it is realistic, and it didn't necessarily like really taint my view of the book. But at the same time, I'm not exactly here for realism. I'm not exactly. So I'm okay with that being like left to the side. But it's an interesting conversation, right? Like, how much of our own politics should we enter inside a book if it's not realistically going to be the politics of the person that we are talking about, War? But I say that, but at the same time, it's like, he's getting with a woman. So I'm gonna need you to be for women, okay? Do you see what I'm saying? Like, for example, there's a lot of like calling women sluts and whores and hoes and stuff in a very like derogatory way, because of like their actions and stuff like that, like dressing a certain way, acting a certain way, etc, etc, etc. And I'm like, you sir are literally no better than any of these women. But because you have money and wealth, and because you're a man, it's okay. So for me, I struggle with plot lines like that. But anyway, so this is so funny, right? So as I said, they've all, in this crime family, they've all got their own situations outside of like the criminal element. And one of it is that their parents own like an apartment complex, and they said it's full of like young students. But when you hear the description of the stuff that's in this apartment, I was like, damn. Like, for example, it says, right, we had top of the line amenities, including a full gym that included a cycle, yoga and Pilates room. We also had a basketball court, pool, jacuzzi and open field for stuff like footballs or just chilling. During the warm months, we did things like movies on the lawn that we called movies at the Davises. You couldn't have a successful lifestyle community without a dog park. We took it a step further with dog grooming areas. I said, my comment was, well shit, they be rich students. I'm like, I don't know what kind of student life they're living. Yeah, but that was not my student life, babe. That was not my student life. What? That is so crazy. Especially because he then said that the prices, right, were the studio and 1-bedroom apartments, right? Apartments as a student, which is different. I suppose it depends what like age student you are. Anyway, it's besides the point. That ranged from $1,500 to $1,800 a month, while the 2 to 4 bedroom apartments range from $900 to $1,200 a person a month. I said, well, shit. I said, that's not even a lot of rent these days for all of that stuff listed. I'm sorry. Well, I'm not renting at the moment, so like maybe my knowledge of the rental market is different. But from my understanding of the rental market, that is a steal. That's a steal. People will be lining up to get inside one of them apartments, including me. Sign me up, babe. Do you know what I mean? Not that it's cheap either. Like, as I said, I'm not renting. But like, for all of those amenities and the way that they're living up in there, I was like, boy. So harking back to what I said about like class and me looking for like class representation and romance, right? There is something in here that's really unhelpful. They have made this whole comment about the brother thinking that he was too lazy to be an engineer, which is why he ended up being a mechanic. And he doesn't even refute that. He's like, well, maybe he's right. But I'm like, there's no shade to being a mechanic. Like, a mechanic is a highly qualified, not even qualified because that it seems like a official qualification, but like is in a highly, can't think of the word, but it's a good profession, right? And I don't know, it kind of makes it seem like it requires less education, less hard work, less knowledge, and it's like, no, that's not the case. That's not the case. So I didn't think that much of it. All I said was not helpful. That's literally my entire comment. Not helpful. All of those thoughts, not helpful. I really liked all of her names in this book. That's something that I wanted to mention as well. The fact that she's like Peace Blossom, Blossom Peace, Pay. No, she's not good pay, but like I really did enjoy that because it was like it's representative of real life. Like usually we don't just have one name. I know lots of people are different, but usually we have nicknames, but sometimes in romances like there's no nicknames unless it's a pet name, and that's not exactly the same thing. So I did enjoy seeing the nicknames of it all. Here you can see that I was having a good time because I got like crying face emoji, and I know later on I'm like, oh, I'm eating this up. So I did have a good time when reading it. Another thing that I liked in this book is that there was no like, oh, I don't know how to do my makeup, somebody help me, I'm really struggling, oh, like I'm just like, because there's sometimes this sort of like virtue signaling that comes from being not very good at doing makeup or hair. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, I'm just so innocent, like there's a sort of innocence, you know. And I'm sure there's people who've spoken about that before. Like, I don't know, but that's just something that I've noticed when reading romances. But in this book, she's like, I can slay my hair and do my makeup like the best of them. And I'm like, period. And later on, she's like, oh, I went to the school of YouTube. And I'm like, again, period, because most of us do. Most of us do, like, informal education when it comes to doing our makeup. Like, you don't just wake up and be amazing at makeup. Again, that's a skill. It's a skill. We can all be beautiful. We just have to learn how to utilize makeup. But what does that say about beauty politics? Let's not get into it. Now we're gonna get into the real meat of some of my issues in this book. So far, like everything that I've said in terms of like issues, they're not really issues. They're just like things of note, things that cross my mind. Like I didn't actually really have an issue with most of it. This is now, we're on page 86-ish. Here where I start noting, not that I didn't think it before, but this is where I start noting like my main problem with this book, and it's in terms of the children. So as I told you, Peace is a single mother. Specifically, she's a single mother to a young black boy aged 12 years old, right? And he's described as being like quite big, like big for his age. But apart from that, you know, he's 12 or 13. I think at some point I say he's 13, so a 13-year-old boy, right? And bearing in mind, as I told you, the first time he's tied up in a chair in a mechanic in front of all of these drug dealers, etc., like that is traumatizing. Do they ever address that? No, they don't, right? Instead, this is real spoilers from here on out. Instead, they're like, the solution is you have to go work for him and all of the people that tied you up in a chair. And I think they even beat him up. I'm not even sure. I actually feel like they hit him. They laid hands on this 13-year-old boy. I can't be sure though, so let me not spread vicious rumors. Do you know what I mean? And I'm like, that's so inappropriate. But anyway, and not only that, the mum goes to work for him as well. So everyone in this family now has left whatever they were doing to go, apart from the granddad, to go and work for him. But that's not even the main thing. The main thing is that his friends, so he did it with his friends, and his friends, it was clear that they didn't have a good home life situation, and so they immediately start to live with the granddad. The granddad then gets ownership of them in 2 weeks. I'm like, I was like, in 2 weeks? Next comment is where it gets worse. It says, I don't like how immediately she has relinquished control of her life. Boundaries are good. Because, think about it like this. Her son now works for this man. She's left her job, right, to go and work for him. Her friend, so when we meet her, she hasn't really got many friends outside of work, but she's got one work friend. Her work friend ain't shit. But in the course of this book, she drops her work friend and ends up picking up friends that are like all of War's friends, other partners, you know what I mean? Like a WAG group almost. So that means all of her friends now are to do with him. And I just didn't like how immediately her whole life ended up shifting and revolving around war and his world. I don't think that's healthy. As I said, I think boundaries are very, very good. And it was like, it got worse and worse and worse as the book got along. Like, she just kept getting more and more enmeshed in his whole world and his whole situation. And I'm like, babe, like, to have no separation, like, even, I say that because her dad ends up revealing what I said about the mic drop. That was him revealing that actually I used to be the head drug lord in this area. I used to be head honcho, yeah? So before you look down on War for being like a criminal, right? Talk nice, because that was what your dad used to do, yeah? But then the dad is, and as I said, the dad knew them for some reason or another. So even now, the dad is also related to War and his entire world. And that's what I'm saying. It's just like, it's not healthy at all. And to quickly, and especially from someone who has been in such a traumatic situation before in terms of her ex-partner, which very much comes into play right in this book, to go from that to then trying to fiercely hold on to your independence to then immediately like relinquishing everything, I just don't think that's a healthy trajectory personally. Do you know what I mean? And I think my main thing in that is that she has a son that she's taking along with her, and that is where it like crossed the line for me. I was like, this boy is traumatized, and like there's not enough care being taken to like make sure this boy is okay. And not only that, seems to be like an adultification of him almost, and it's like part of like that aging up of young black boys. They are children, and it was like sometimes they treated him like he was older than he was. And I'm like, yeah, they still looked at him as a child, but like, I don't know, just some of the stuff that they placed on him, I was like, he's a baby. Do you know what I mean? And we'll get into it. Like, so for example, let's talk about it. One of the first scenes with the ex-partner like present on the page is he comes to like check what's going on. He's like, what's going on, right? Bearing in mind, sorry, he constantly cusses off the mum to the son on the phone. That's the pretext. He's constantly on the phone to this 13-year-old boy like, your mum ain't shit, your mum's a hoe, your mum's this, your mum's that, right? Then he finally turns up because he's like, what? He's noticed that she's like shifted away from him, and that everyone is now starting to like idolize and love off War. So he's like, nah, I need to go down there and see what's going on. So he turns up, right? And he's like, I need to speak to my woman. And War's like, no, we'll do it here. We'll do it right here. And for some reason or another, I can't remember the real reason, they bring the son into the room. Is that appropriate? Is that appropriate to have the 13-year-old boy there, right, while there's this big beef going on between War, who he now idolizes? He starts to idolize War because they're like, we're gonna like put a real firm hand on him and we're gonna help raise him because he needs a male figure in his life. So you've now got his new like male figure in his life battling up against his actual father with his mum in the room. It's just toxic. It was toxic as hell, right? And for example, he's like, yeah, damn, I wanted trusted to check his dad, but I didn't think he would go that deep in terms of like, he's now molding him to cuss off his dad, and that's not healthy either. And then this happens, right, which is just really horrible, and it is addressed as really horrible in the book. His dad then goes, like, once the son starts mouthing off to the dad, because, you know, that's sort of the vibe he's getting from everybody else in the room. My dad ain't shit, so like, you know, it's time for me to mouth off to my dad and protect my mum. Like, do you know what I mean? It's like, protect my mum. And the dad comes and punches him in the face. He's 13. He's 13. The dad comes and punches the son square in the face at 13 years old. I was appalled. I was appalled. Honestly, I tell you, I was appalled. It's meant to be appalling. Don't get me wrong, it's meant to be appalling, but I was appalling. But my thing is that later on in the book, like, do they ever really do anything to like counsel him, to help him through all of the stuff that's happened to him because of his dad, and later on the things that happened to his mum because of his dad, and like all of the things we've witnessed? Like, at some point he reveals how much he was aware of the abuse that was going on in the household. Do they do anything to rectify that? To, you know, nothing. He's just living with this trauma. I'm like, this is not good. Like, therapy exists, and I think it is needed in this situation. And so at the end of this whole situation, obviously the dad doesn't get away scot-free. Obviously they're like, pew, 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 right? They're like, it was meant to be a punch, but it kind of looked like a stab. So punch. So like, yeah, no, he's not gonna get away with that. But then at the end of that whole situation, right, this is what War says to the boy. He says, young boy, he says his name, but I'm gonna say young boy because I haven't really used his name much, right? Young boy, your father is a bitch and I don't want you to be anything like him. That is not a good statement to say to him. That is not a good statement to say to him. He is half of his father. And so now you're now introducing this complex in him where he's going to be like trying to fight 50% of him. You know them books where it's like, I'm nothing like my dad. This is what he's going to end up growing up to be. Especially when you have your new male role model telling you, I don't want you to be nothing like your dad. What? And I understand the sentiment, I do completely, but we have to be careful when we're addressing like young children and make sure to like nurture them in the right way. And then worse. It was like he lowered his face into his hands. He stayed that way for a second before lifting it to look at me. The wetness rested in the corner of his eyes, but I knew he wouldn't let the tears fall. In the weeks we had been interacting, he had become more prideful than he previously had been. I had enjoyed watching him and the other boys transform right before my eyes. Whoa. This is the opposite. I said, no, this is the opposite of positive. Real men cry. This is a crying situation. He's 13 and he just got boxed off, laid on the ground by his dad. And then his dad just got beat up. I was like, no, let the boy cry. If he can't cry now, when can he cry? And then this is when, we have grown men who can't cry. This is why. Because one of the biggest things that have ever happened to you in your whole life and you can't let out tears, child, it was too much. I literally said, no, this is the opposite of positive. I think this is like right when I started being like, whoa, I don't know if I can deal with it. And War has like this mentality often. This is what he says about someone. I keep referring to him and his bitch separately because I wholeheartedly believe that one can excise their bitch. It's about if you want it out of you. I was like, what logic is this, please? Please explain it to me. Because I don't understand. But yeah, overall I did find it funny. Look, you can see me laughing again here. And then we've got some more like not positive female situation in terms of P's mum. P's mum is labelled as like this woman who just tried to trap a man and then ended up really toxic towards her children. But in the context of all of the women that have been portrayed in this book, from the ex-best friend was labelled like as a whore, everything, that's why she went shit. Do you know what I mean? And then we've got the mum, who again is a whore. All of these random women around are whores. It's like, whoa. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, I'm just not happy at like the female representation in this book. The only women that aren't called whores are like the men's partners. It's like they inherit status through their partners, and I don't really appreciate that myself. But and then we skip to, sorry, I'm gonna talk about something completely different. In the middle of the sex scene, right? Sorry, he says, that monkey wet, referring to her vagina. I said, I don't like that pet name at all. At all. There were other lots of little bits that I said, but like nothing that's as big as like the main point that I've spoken to you about. Talking about the female like representation, at one stage Peace herself says, my fellatio skills levels surpass most females. I'd had years of practice. Babe, haven't we all? Well, not me, but so let me just say what I said. I said, pick me. So do a lot of people, babe. So do a lot of people have a lot of practice. It's not exactly unique. I was like, great. Okay. Talking about, the child again. When it comes to telling, so obviously Peace and War get into a relationship. And then it's like time to tell the son and tell the family. And War's like, I'm nobody's bitch. Like, you can't keep it secret. Like, I'm not a secret side person. And I get that completely. That's a rational thought to have. You want validation. And so he gave Peace a time limit. He said, he told me I had 48 hours to tell him or he would. Let's talk about the son. He told the mother of her child, she's got 48 hours to tell her child, otherwise he's going to tell him. What? I said, not health communication at all, nor practical. That child needs stability, and rushing into this is not a vibe. It's not a vibe at all. I said, no. And obviously, she then rushed into it. When she starts to say, I'm with a new man, they describe the son as getting up in a full-blown panic. And I'm like, no shit, because he just saw your new man box off his dad. I'm like, no wonder he's intimidated at the idea of you getting with a new person. He's only ever seen toxic male representation around you. Do you know what I mean? That's what you have to take. You have to do this carefully. And then, yeah, and then they end up getting all upset about it. I can't remember, or they're nervous. And I'm like, yeah, because this is their entire world, like their entire world. If anything goes wrong with you and Ward, that's their entire world. You know what I mean? Like, they work for him. They spend hours with him. He's their male role figure. Oh, also, Ward's brother, right? They end up forming such a huge bond with Ward's brother. Then it's like, as soon as she adopted the two boys, like his friends, all of her new friends, like they said they were like their grandsons now, like they adopted them as well. And it's like, these are all people that they're scared of losing if you and War don't work, and there's no consideration into that at all. Or like, there is an attempt, I will say that there's an attempt, but I just don't feel like it was done well. Does that make sense?
Here's another screenshot that I think is key to include because, yeah, sums up everything I've been saying.
Anyway, I think that's all of the main things that I have to say, and I've been talking for longer than I expected. So yeah, I don't know. Overall, this book, I had a good time. Like, it was so entertaining, like but it did have a lot of problems, specifically around one area. And I'd love to know, if you read it, what did you guys think about it, and this whole plot line. And if you haven't read it, just like let me know what your thoughts are in terms of like accurate representation in terms of what their politics are likely to be. But anyway, I gotta go. So I'll speak to you guys later. Bye, guys.